We've looked at your background and honestly, you're just a bit overqualified. Something about that doesn't quite hold up. Sounds like a compliment, but it doesn't behave like one. The first time you hear it, you nod. The second time, you notice it. By the third time, it starts to feel off. You're standing there with over 30 years of experience, the kind that actually keeps a business from sinking. And you're being told that's the reason they won't hire you. It doesn't quite make sense. I remember the specific phone call. 4:30 on a Thursday. One of those recruiters who sounds like he's permanently mid-sprint. Great CV, he said. Really impressive. But the feedback from the hiring manager, they're worried you'd be bored. They think you're overqualified for the salary bracket. I sat there looking at my garden holding a cold cup of tea. I told him I was fine with the money. I told him I wanted the role because I knew I could do it with my eyes shut. I was trying to be the safe pair of hands, the thing we're all told the market wants. He just went quiet. That specific awkward silence you get down the pub when you've said something a bit too honest. Yeah, he muttered, I'll pass that on. And 3 days later, the automated email arrives. We've decided to move forward with candidates who more closely align with the requirements of the role. It's a very clean sentence. It doesn't tell you what didn't align, it just tells you something didn't. When you hear that word, your brain tries to solve the logic. You think, if I'm too good for the job, surely I'm the best person to do it. You start looking at your CV like it's a list of previous convictions. You think about deleting the more senior roles. You think about hiding the dates. You start wondering if you should pretend to be less than you are just to get a seat at the table. It's a strange feeling. The system spends over 30 years telling you to grow, to lead, to upskill. And then, the moment you reach the peak of that mountain, it tells you the air up there is too thin. It just doesn't add up. After a few months, you start noticing something about that word. You realise overqualified isn't an evaluation of your capability. It never was. They know you can do the job, and that might be part of the problem. Most teams aren't looking for disruption. They're looking for someone who fits the rhythm that's already there. When you walk into a room with over 30 years of context, you aren't just a worker, you're a witness. You've seen the restructures that didn't work, you've seen the software rollouts that crashed, you've seen the middle managers who use jargon to hide the fact that they don't have a plan. You're a complex variable in a system that craves simplicity. If you look at the mechanism under the hood, overqualified starts to look less like feedback and more like a proxy signal for risk. There's the friction risk, the worry that you won't take direction from someone who's still learning how to run a meeting, the assumption that you'll be sitting there quietly checking the clock thinking about how you would have solved the problem 3 hours ago. Then there's the flight risk, the assumption that the moment a proper role comes along, one that matches your old status, you'll be gone, that you're using them as a lifeboat, not a destination. And finally, there's the dynamic risk. If they hire someone in their 20s, they get someone they can mould. If they hire you, the dynamic changes. The conversations change. The expectations change. They're managing for stability, not optimization. Overqualified is just the corporate shorthand for you're a high performance engine, but we're only looking for something to power the lawnmower, and we're not sure how you'd fit into it. You can feel the instinct to argue your way out of it, to try and prove how passionate you are about a mid level role. But after a while, it starts to sound less like feedback and more like a signal. You start to see it more often. It's not a verdict on your worth, it's an admission of their own constraints. They aren't rejecting your talent, they're rejecting the complexity that comes with it. They are choosing a quiet life over a better result. Once you see it as a risk label rather than a skill assessment, the perspective shifts. It's no longer about whether you're good enough. It's about the narrowness of the gap they're trying to fill. When you hear that word now, it doesn't quite land the same way. It still sounds like feedback, but it doesn't behave like it. It behaves more like a filter for something they're not quite set up to handle. It can start to sound like you need to shrink yourself to fit back in. But the reality is that the system is just currently looking for smaller parts. And once you notice that, it's hard to hear it the old way again. Let me know in the comments, how many times have you heard it? And looking back, what was the friction they were actually afraid of? No advice, just the data. I'll see you next time.